Alrighty. I guess welcome to a sort of semi-finance guild, semi-coordination circle kind of private prep meeting. I can say for sure it's happening on April 10th, and it is lifeboat related. And because it is lifeboat related, as is our custom, we start by acknowledging the land. And I was just at a conference yesterday that had a Kwantlen elder do the opening. And it was lovely. And one of the things that she did, she welcomed us to the land and she said, and of course, there are, many of our neighbors. And then she, in the room, pointed in the direction of the different nations and said, the Squamish, the Sleetooth, et cetera, et cetera. And which I quite liked that she was like physically orienting, these are our neighbors, these are, around us. And then she came to, I think it's the Semyamu, but it was one, or maybe the Stolat, but one that has a number of different bands, or, there's sort of there's not one consolidated nation. And she said, and I don't know all of them, but I'm committing to learn that. And I actually felt really uh, it was such a cool sort of recognition that this elder also was learning, and was also open to um, oh, and she also did this great thing at the end because she sort of closed and then she said, and I don't sing. My husband sings. If he sings, I sing along, but I can't do the song. Sorry. And it was just love. It was so human and she was just so real. And and it felt actually very invitational in that, it was done with a great deal of respect and also was very motivating, and at the same time was also very human and very invitational. And so my acknowledgement today is to acknowledge that Elder Cheryl. Um, and um, and I think just a reminder of we keep learning. Maya Angelou, we do the best we can until we know better, and then we do better. And so, in acknowledging the land, we are acknowledging as well that it is a living thing and that we are part of it and that our experience is part of it. And as part of that living thing, we are always growing. And so, just take a moment, invite you to create the space to just take a moment to ground yourself. So, I know. I think Becca and I both have expressed our discombobulation.
Do you want to make me a co-host? Because Heather responded and
Okay,
she should be, I'll keep an eye out for if she shows up.
cool. There we go. Thank you for that. So yeah, just taking a moment to take a breath, find your seat. Just take a moment to be a body in a place. Feel into the various senses, points of contact, temperature of the air against your skin, sounds and smells in the room. And just take a few deep breaths, breathing in that fresh oxygen, fresh energy for every cell, and then release and relax, letting go of what no longer serves you. And when you're ready, come join us back in the circle.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Heather.
I can't hear you.
Oh,
Um,
Can you hear me?
I'm betting that's a no.
I'm on my phone. I don't need to be that. I got a text through my phone, so I can't. If I could get it in my email, then I can go onto my computer.
I can send the link in the email.
And I can't hear you, so I'm
Oh.
but you're nodding your head like you can hear me.
Right. So Heather, can you hear us yet?
Too bad there isn't a host function, like host invites the person to open their audio settings that they could just click on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, if you're
Oh, there we
listening,
go.
that's a requested feature.
That's right. And stop listening. There we
Yikes.
go.
Oh my God.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you well. Yes.
Good.
A little bit sheepish. I just,
I can't. I've tried Zoom on my phone a couple times and I can log in often, but then all of the any I can't make
yeah.
anything happen. I can't like look at chat at the same time or yeah, I don't like it on the phone.
And I think I know what's happening with your emails is that, and I couldn't find it, is that some emails, like I've got it filed under Lifeboat. So some emails come in and they remain in my inbox, but they're also filed.
Oh,
Yeah.
Seems like Lifeboat is not being in, I can't get it in my inbox. It just goes directly. And
It's being
I don't
filtered.
think that that could be,
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to even say something's happening because I know it's user error or lack
But
of.
also, I'm not sure there was ever a link sent for this meeting. I
No, I think
went in through
yeah.
the old link, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and
Yeah.
also there was so much back and forward that in my mind I got it scrambled. Oh, I can't meet it at 10:30. Oh, maybe we should have it earlier. Oh, that's too early for me. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get something that says when this meeting is happening.
Hmm.
Okay, here I am, and let's don't want to waste any more of your time here.
Right. Well, and so let's start let's start with a check-in, just to give everyone a chance to land and say how you're coming into the meeting. And then after that, let's sort of develop the agenda together. What are some of the things that we want to talk through this morning, since everything's all sort of topsy-turvy. So does anyone have a check-in question to offer up, or shall we just do how you doing?
how you doing?
All right. Circle as I see it, Becca, Roland, Heather, me. So Becca, over to you. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I have a little bit of a sore neck and shoulder you'll see me doing this a lot, but slept really well last night, so feeling good. And yeah, I'm trying not to. I was away for 2 weeks, and you sort of let go of some responsibilities when you go away that long, and I'm trying to not get ramped up quite so maxed out busy, but we'll see how that goes. Over to Roland.
I think I'm doing good. I got really triggered um, from the exchange with Steph yesterday, and I shared with you the message, and I think that's just part of being exhausted and trying to recover from exhaustion while being in a draining situation, personally and globally. And so part of my remembering this morning is how I'm not the only one who is whose nervous system is fritzed out, and that becomes a cue on how I want to be with myself and with others. So that's where I am at. Over to Heather.
Yeah, I'm feeling unusually um old. Not not remembering things as much as I want to, and I need it's appropriate for me to remember and just feeling achy and but today is a kind of a really nice day here, so that's perked me up.
Mm.
And I did listen to I read everything, and this is either good news or bad news. It's really hard to tell, whether she's open to a new arrangement that would work for us, um, or whether she's really feeling like she seems in the game, but I think we just have to find out. But I can understand why you might be nervous. Yeah. So over to Ben.
Oh, I saw it. That's funny. I saw it as a positive thing from the message from Steph, if that's what we're talking about. Um, how I am doing is I'm just settling in after I'm in the middle of still a very hectic period with lots of coming and going and lots of different projects on the move. And so feeling a little frayed in terms of I haven't had a day off in a couple weeks. And so, feeling a little bit like the tank is on fumes, but I there's a little bit of light on the horizon. And so that's keeping me going, but my uh, I may not be on my A game in terms of immediate comprehension. So we'll just take it as it comes. And so I'm also really grateful that Steph couldn't meet today because I would have been frayed and feeling like there was a big thing going on and trying to be present for that. Um, so let's start. The next round, let's build our agenda. Um, and basically, what I'm imagining is that this is primarily a meeting to prep for the conversation, just to make sure that we're on the same page about talking to Steph. And but that could mean lots of different things, little pieces and parts. And so let's just go around the circle and what are you hoping that we can get from the time together? And I don't have anything prepared in terms of an agenda, so I'm going to use the uh, actually no, I'm going to create a Google Doc to do notes, and we'll go from there. But so go continue on, and I will make that doc happen and start gathering up our agenda items. Over to you, Rebecca.
Could you share that
I'm
also?
going to as soon as I
Yeah.
create it.
Yeah, I think obviously the highest priority is planning for the meeting with Steph. I also would like us to make a plan for reviewing the bylaws, comments from Bill, and if not today, then when? And I looked through them. They seem pretty like minor changes mostly, so that's good. And I didn't see any red flags. So, but there are things to discuss. Um, Over to Roland.
I think I may have missed did Bill send an email to say that he was done or just that they were available?
He said it was mostly done, and there was one thing he was looking up or something.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure if he finished that one or not, but I looked at what he had sent and I paid a
And
bill, which wasn't very much money actually. So
now we've discussed it, I remember that I responded to your email saying that I was going to look at them and I haven't. All right. Speaking of memory, okay, star
Agenda.
bill agenda. And I was thinking of uh, we haven't altogether talked about the proposal that Ben produced for the meeting with Steph. So doing that together, I think we've read it and made some comments. And so looking at it together and also talking with live voices on the comments that Becca and I made. And that's what I would mostly want to do today, thinking of the amount of time that we have. And then maybe agreeing on a time to when to if we have time today or if we want to have focused time to do a collective bylaw review over to Heather.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I was expecting, to prep for Steph's meeting and talk about the proposal that Ben had put forward. So it's over to Becca to see whether how much and what I think we need to do with the bylaws. I'm I'm kind of phasing out the bylaws and not taking responsibility for them.
There's that whole
In paper, I'm sure that if we can come to some kind of agreement, they will be as good as we possibly can make them. So that's good for me.
there's that thing about you can make something invisible by putting somebody else's problem on it. You just label it somebody else's problem and it
Well,
disappears.
I would have let go of it long. I would have let go of it long ago. So I really appreciate people who can who have a really attention to detail.
Mm.
So that's really good to have someone in that group like that.
Well, and so from me, I haven't looked at the comments yet, so I'm not prepared to talk about it today, but I, I think, I'm imagining this is kind of the one thing that we maybe even can just do by email or at the next time that we meet. But it would be really nice to wrap that up, have it done.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we could at least put a timeline on, let's get it done by within 2 weeks,
Yeah.
um, by the next time our regular planned meeting is, um, and if there are no red flags, then I can't imagine that they're,
I
hard
just,
things to figure out.
it just has to be good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Not perfect.
All right, well let's dive into the plan. Do we want to go over actually I'm going to stop sharing the notes and I have the other document open and I'll share that. And so let's actually I'm just trying to think about the best way of reviewing it because it doesn't seem like there are that many questions or comments. Um, I have it up mostly because it's been so long. I wanted to remember what I actually said in it.
Hmm.
Um, and um, yeah, I think actually let's just popcorn. Like what are the questions?
Can you
Um,
make it a bit bigger?
And I wanted to also say, in terms of my reaction to Steph's message and Ben's reaction, it's one of the ways in which I feel like Ben balances me because I do tend towards the negative. And I know that in myself. And that, you know, anyway, so yes, I wanted to say that because I was also thinking about Becca reminding us of where Steph was at the last time we met, and how that might how that reflects in what we're thinking of talking about. That's my popcorn pop.
Yeah, and I think for me, partly, um, I'm imagining she has more tension over the fact that there haven't been any viewings or any offers. So, it has been on the market, and it's sort of stalled at the moment. So I imagine that I was reading any sort of urgency in her comments of being about that. Plus, she specifically said, while the world is falling apart. And I think that, um, that also provided some context of, in a way, for me, in a way that underlines the value of what we're doing. But
Yeah, I
yeah.
really picked up on that really, really strongly. And also I know that the real estate market is really soft. I mean,
Mhm.
all over the place. It's decreasing in price in Vancouver dramatically for rental properties. I have friends that can't sell their condo. Yeah, it's a very insecure time if you have property trying to sell it. So I think in that sense we're strong. And I just, yeah, I just think we have to have real confidence, as much as confidence as we can, that we can pull this off. Because I don't want to see us actually um, buying it for more than the real estate market is, I mean,
Mm.
maybe the stalling and making sure that she can move on is, but let's just hear from her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the one thing I would like to propose, specifically in terms of establishing the value of the property is, and it's a fairly common practice. She hires an appraiser, we hire an appraiser, and we
Mhm.
we split the difference.
Mhm.
And I would like to have the property appraised in part because I'm confident. I'm 100% confident the roof will need to be replaced in the next couple of years. So there is probably some electrical work that is not that needs to be done. That we just know from living here that there's some deferred maintenance issues.
Yeah.
And so, having that appraised and, whatever the market value is minus whatever, that deferred maintenance is, and she has somebody, we have someone, and that's the price we set.
Yeah. Good.
Um, so that it feels fair and, you know,
Yeah, I read her. I can't find it now, the message that you forwarded on, but I read it as she's feeling some urgency in her living situation to change it rather than so I was more on the uh-oh side of the interpretation, but also if the real estate market is that depressed, then she might also be able to find something there for less money. But my concern is that what I'm reading the ask it as saying, I don't see how she could go buy some place in Vancouver unless that was also um, progressive, thing where she didn't have to, pay for it much down. I do think that her outstanding debt is lower than it says in here. The email that I sent with the summary of our conversation last July, it was 375K remaining on her
oh,
mortgage.
okay.
Um, and that she's been declining other offers partly because they don't seem high enough, but partly because she wants to support Lifeboat, and she's doing that at some sacrifice to herself and her son's quality of life because they're living in a very small place and she can't afford a bigger one until she sells the farm. Um, so I don't know, how things have evolved and how old her son is, and
At,
there's
at least 16.
stuff about the zoning variance that might be needed, but that Ben disagreed. And anyway, it feels like there's maybe some homework from that we haven't yet done. I'm not sure. But it also says she would consider being a benefactor shareholder, but only if she can have a good place to live in Vancouver too.
Yeah.
Um, so if we can come up with 2.25 million Canadian, she might be able to afford 250K in Class B shares. Um, so yeah, finding out what's changed for her, but not going in ignorant of what she said before, I think is important.
I think one of the questions that I have questions, and uh, one of them is uh, the 2 point whatever million would be for her to be able to to buy a place outright. And instead of looking at, and and this is, I don't know how these things work, so, feel free to correct me. But if we were, instead of focusing on retiring Steph's outstanding debt, that what would she need as a down payment for a new place?
She can't qualify for a mortgage.
Ah, okay. Oh, because this isn't a she doesn't have a mortgage. She has what is it called? A line of
She has
credit?
a line of credit, but that's not the issue. The issue is once you get it, your income can change, and that's not a problem. But her income right now is not. She was saying her income's like a couple thousand a month.
Hmm.
That's in the notes too. It's 3,000 a month, not including the 2,000 a month that Ben and Roland are paying, which just covers the mortgage payments on the land.
Yeah. So for that, and as a single buyer, she wouldn't qualify for a mortgage for pretty much. She'd have to have a substantial down payment
Okay.
to be able to get a mortgage on something.
Hmm.
So
I wonder
yeah.
if I could co-sign on a loan for her. I mean, I don't know if she would want to, but like, and my husband would probably have fits, but there might be creative ways.
Well, but there's still, I think there's a question then of, how much could she afford in terms of mortgage payments, right? So,
Yes, yes,
um, it's generous of you to co-sign, but you can't co-pay, right? Like, so, that would be
right.
anyhow.
Well, and this is also, I am thinking of this meeting with Steph as not as being um, part of a larger conversation. That we don't just, it's not just the one meeting with Steph. Because, I mean, even if we propose, for example, if we propose something like having a cosigner for a loan, then that would have to be part of a larger conversation. I was also wondering about, at one point, Ben, you were talking about Chris Alpavar,
Adel Pavar.
and I was right. I wrote in the my uh, response email for this round that um, it wouldn't be for us to figure out what would be possible between Steph and Chris, but it would be rather connecting Steph and Chris for them to see if there's something that could be worked out. Maybe we can do some sort of groundwork and make some suggestions or something, but ultimately they would have to decide between themselves what might be possible there.
Although, I mean, there could be some, if he was willing to be generous on the timing and payments of something for her because of wanting to support Lifeboat, there, there might be something to be said for a three-way conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the other thing too, there's nothing to buy yet from on Chris's project, right?
Mm.
They are still very much in the developmental, they're in the planning stage of it. They're not even, I don't think they have property or, I'm not even sure where they are in terms of fundraising. I think they were so.
Mm.
he would be that there would be a mutual timeline, like we would be on a similar timeline that they would be on, right? Where probably there would be actually at this point they're not even looking, or I don't know this for sure, but I think it's unlikely that they're looking for people that are going to buy into the land trust. They're looking for early investors who are going to put down seed money for the development of it.
Mm.
So if Steph were to get into that right now, then she would be like one of the first potential residents, I think, that would probably get involved in the project. Um, and I don't know the details. And the last time we talked, he did say that there'd been some changes in, how they were moving forward. And we were talking about other stuff. We were talking about lifeboat stuff, so I didn't get an update on his stuff there. But I think the other point here is there is it's how do I want to say this? What we should get agreed on what works for us first before making assumptions about what may or may not work for Steph, and just make sure that this is something that makes sense to us before moving forward. And likewise, I guess it could be useful to talk about what alternatives might we put forward, where are we willing to compromise and where can't we compromise and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So if we're talking about what makes sense for us, and I think with, in the back of my mind, I will still be thinking about what I know of what she's told us. Then is it just going through the game plan and seeing if we agree?
Hmm.
Yeah, that we need to change that 600,000 as well.
Hmm.
I mean, this isn't anything. This is for us, not for Steph,
Yeah.
specifically.
But
But,
it would be good for me, and I don't know, maybe I've just missed it, but it would be good for me to have a number of scenarios, financial scenarios, just at the higher level, like how you broke down how many people we needed to enroll and whatever, but just to have a sense of what if this, and this.
mhm.
Like I do well with budgets and spreadsheets. Uh, it comes, it's much clearer for me than us having a conversation about it.
I can tell you the pyramid stuff, it's mathematical formula, which is I kept a couple things constant because they're easy and nice round numbers, but the $1,600 share and the a quarter share is $40,000, which again is, a very nice round number. And the traditional way you do a pyramid is you have a few bigger tickets and then
Yeah,
you double the number and you have the investment. So, the and likewise a quarter, half, full share, they're tied to something tangible. And the other criteria was the no more than 50 investors. So, making sure that we didn't come bumping up against like a securities issue. But the numbers work out really tidy. It's like,
yeah,
you
I
know,
loved it. I mean, that was really like, okay, I understand this now, but that's the income part of it. And I don't
that's
have
the investment part. That is not the
the
income part.
investment part, I mean, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah. I don't know, maybe this is just me, but to have confidence in this, I would like to see more like revenue end of things and what are their expenses and things.
We have a revenue, that's part of the business plan. We have a revenue projection. I haven't updated it, but in a sense, anything that we do is going to be complete speculation
I know.
until we actually do it. So from the speculative numbers, they work. And the other thing too is that in terms of income, the actual overhead, if we take out rent, the actual cost of maintaining this property, and if we take out the big ticket like replacing the roof,
Yeah.
then the overhead for maintaining the property is very, very low, including, paying the hydro and paying the taxes and, all that kind of stuff. So if we have people that are investing who are investing long term and they're not expecting to be paid a profit off of that investment, but they're participating in the project, then the income stream is really, it's up to our, what we want to do with it. And there are very viable income streams through something like an Airbnb, guest accommodations, um, the educational, using the property for events, plus the actual food that we could grow if we actually had people dedicated to growing. So, the income streams are identified, and how much we can make off of them depends on whether or not we can actually produce on it. But we can't, in the absence of being able to try it, I don't know how else we could sort of test those income streams. I
They
mean,
just have to be ballpark, and maybe and I do that all the time, but maybe we don't need that for the investors. I don't know what the investors are asking for, like how is this going to be viable? And do we have a high level of all these different income streams and you
we
know,
have that all. It's in the business plan. It's been there from the beginning.
okay, I'll look at it.
It's and I can tell
Just
you, and the if anything, it is probably a conservative estimate on
okay.
if in terms of the where the money would actually come from is probably in the agritourism part, right? In
Yeah.
terms of the it doing events or having guests pay for visits. That's where the highest income potential is. And that, sort of the educational aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that the investors, again, the way that we're structuring this is why I'm going directly to timeshare investors, either benefactors or timeshare investors. They are investing for the project itself. Like that's why they would be buying it to be part of the timeshare homestead or
Yeah.
to be part of the project. So these would be people who are not investing as a financial investment, just looking for the money
Right.
that they
Right.
want to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah. 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 I just have to remind myself of that then.
I mean, a lot of it
So,
really is that the big unknowns here is what Steph's, if she is open to it. No, I want to say the other thing I want to say is if nothing else, just retiring her debt, even if we like kept it on the market and we retired her debt and it was proportional to the value of the land, then instead of paying interest to the bank, she could be paying either whoever's investing or it just gets taken out proportionally with the sale. So that lifts a burden from her, which lifts a burden from us.
Wow.
Because
but
we're paying rent to pay her mortgage.
Yeah. No.
So if we could retire her mortgage and we could keep paying rent, we would be buying shares instead of just giving it to the bank.
And this actually might be, I was just wondering with Heather's question around the business plan. Um, I know that I think we've supplied that to her before, but so the way that I've understood this is that part of the reason why we're suggesting this is that we want to have a sense of security to be able to move forward on projects,
Yeah.
including which includes the getting investors, but it also includes like actually starting the Pharmastery as a retreat place.
Or
So
even
and
or even doing pigs, which would which lowers the taxes, right? So
Right.
like it brings we could probably earn, I'm imagining pig has gone up even more, and we could
Yeah.
what we've done
So,
before gave us
right,
like $8,000 in
right.
income.
Right. So this is why this is part of the proposal. So actually offering the what's it called? Anyway, the income projection to Steph again might actually be useful as a way of being able to say, this is what's possible. We can't do it right now because we don't have a sense of
Tenure.
security or continuity or whatever.
Hmm.
So it might actually be useful to include that in our conversations with her so that she's got numbers that she can look at. And I don't know if it'll make any sense to her, but that's kind of besides the point.
Well, it might make sense to her if we said it in terms of projected guesstimate of income per month or annual income or something. I I think it could be useful, and I think I also have questions about um, would having a lease from her for this year help in terms of being able to run programs and have pigs and like because right now you're just on a like month to month, aren't you?
But at least wouldn't. So if she were to give us a lease, she would. Are if if what's implied is she takes the land off the market so that she holds herself to a lease, then it doesn't give her any benefit. She has no hope of actually selling it, and all it does, it gives us security, but it doesn't give her anything. So that's why, why would she give us a lease? What would be her benefit?
Well, because she if she wants this project, I think we need to communicate if you want this project to succeed, we need more security. And one way would be this, taking the bank out of the mix and us paying you over time instead of paying the bank over time for this land.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't do that because of whatever, I mean, I can think of reasons why she wouldn't be willing to do that. But what about a lease for a year so that we or another going back to that timeline to purchase, something that gives you guys the security to schedule events there and have pigs and I don't
But
understand the pig
again,
thing.
what would be her advantage in giving us a lease? That's the thing, is like there's no upside for her.
Well,
There's a direct cost to her because it ties her hands. Well, and actually the other thing too is a lease does not prevent a sale. So if she were to give us a lease and someone came by and gave her an offer and she accepted the offer, it would void our lease, right? The lease doesn't override the sale.
No, but there
And
can be conditions on the sale.
yeah.
That
Right,
I,
but then that makes it even harder for her to sell it.
yeah,
So
no,
again,
I
it
get what you're
ties her
saying.
hands and it doesn't give her anything.
I wonder if part of this discussion is also not how do we how do we ask for what we want? So that's one of the things. And um, what's reasonable to ask. And I think that this is what we're actually talking about. Like, it might not be to her benefit, and at the same time, she's been with us for how many years now because she wants the project to work. So if we think that there's a reasonable possibility, then we can talk about it. And if we think it's not a reasonable, there isn't a reasonable possibility, then we wouldn't talk to her about it, right?
So a rental property sale in British Columbia, according to AI Overview, does not automatically terminate a tenancy. Your lease remains valid, and the new owner must honor it. You cannot be evicted simply because the property is sold. If the buyer or their close family intends to move in, they must issue a formal 2-month notice to end tenancy after conditions are removed. So I'm not sure what how that applies to you and how secure that would be, but I just I don't I think it's very unlikely if unless her situation has dramatically changed that she's going to be willing to sign the deed of the property over to you once the debt is retired, in the hopes
So
that
it's not, she's not signing the deed over to us. She's signing the deed, she's entering into a collective purchase agreement. So she still owns exactly the same percentage that she owns now. And instead of the other percent being owned by the bank, the other percent is owned by whoever invests in it. So she's still the majority shareholder. And if the sale, if we couldn't raise the money and we had to sell the property, she would still get the same amount. She would still own the same percentage of the property that she does now. It's just that instead of the bank owning the other part, we would own the other part. So she's not signing a deed over to anybody else. She retains the deed as a majority shareholder,
So
right? So
well,
that's
it
why
says title transfers to the cooperative.
to
Steph
the
retains
cooperative, and
shared.
then she is the
Right.
majority shareholder in the cooperative.
He's part of the co-op. Yeah.
So she's basically the social mortgage
Yeah,
uh, lender.
right. That's exactly it. She becomes the owner. And if we could raise the other thing that's an advantage to her, it may not give her all of the money up front. But again, I want to remind us all, there has not been a showing in the last year.
yeah, and the with the political climate, the likelihood that there is going to be showings is
Hmm.
pretty slim.
So,
Hmm.
it's not like we're competing against,
Yeah.
she has all of these offers and she's been swatting them away. She also can't just magically create a buyer. If she does says no to us, that doesn't make a buyer appear.
Yeah.
So what this would actually allow is, to the degree that we could raise money, we could buy her out as quickly as we could raise the money. Which
Hmm.
seems to me to be like, rather than waiting to sell the whole property, she could sell the property in bits.
Because really,
Yeah.
if we had been able to do that from the beginning, that we would be already,
We probably would have three or four people right now that
yeah,
would be part owners if they could just write a check and invest.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good way to go. I really do. I've been thinking that too.
Yeah, I see it better now that you've said all that.
Yeah.
Um, can we also give her a number? Like, can we get those people like me who've been saying I'm interested to say what number of dollars would you be willing to commit in June or whatever, like
And
as you
that's why I'm thinking I want to have this as a possibility before going and saying, how much could you invest? Instead of saying,
hmm
maybe, possibly, if, and instead say, we now have an agreement. We are looking for investors. How much would you be willing to put up? Because that's been the problem. One of the problems all along is we talk to people and we get a sense of numbers, but it's so ephemeral, It's like it
but some of
may.
them are family, right? I mean,
I
could
haven't
you
talked to
ask
my. I that those are conversations I haven't had in so long because everything has been
yeah.
up in the air.
I just think if I were staff, I would want to have some idea. Well, maybe the 375K is the like it doesn't get triggered. None of this gets triggered until we come up with that. So,
Hmm.
but if we could tell her we think we have 500,000 lined up or something so that she has some sense of like there's a
This is the chicken and the egg problem
right.
again, because, you know, we have had people who were willing to, who were really interested, who backed away because we didn't have bylaws. We've had people who, so where do we need, what do, so I think I'm coming back to what I was saying earlier about what is reasonable for us to have. And is it reasonable for us to be able to say we've got this much money and these many people when we don't feel comfortable and have had experience with people backing away because things weren't clear
Hmm.
with Steph. So, and
Yeah.
And I think there's also um, this is like Roland was saying, I am also seeing this as a first conversation, not a last conversation. And so
Yeah.
saying, our general framework is first we retire your debt, and then you tell us how big a lump you need in a period one and how long you can wait for the full thing to be paid off. And she can tell us, I need everything up front. If she says, the way it is right now, I'm going crazy. I need to be out of here by the end of 2026, then we know, okay, that we would have to raise it in a year. But if she says, actually things are fine, I think we can, given the market, et cetera, et cetera, if I had this much within a year and this much within 5 years or whatever. But, we don't even know what her parameters are. So that's what I'm thinking these are the questions is hey, Steph, what do you need short term, medium term, long term to feel like this could work? And then if she gives us some targets, we can start to say that seems doable or that doesn't. If it's she needs the whole thing within before the end of the year, I don't feel totally comfortable with that. I don't know that we could do that. But if it's, once you retire the debt, then there's some wiggle room, then blah blah blah. So until we have that sense of it, this is I think Roland is saying it's the chicken and the egg. Otherwise, we go out to people and we don't even know how much we need to raise in what timeline.
so then
Yeah.
if we have, if, so I think for me, the strongest bit of the proposal now to Steph is that is forming the co-op where she is the majority shareholder and um, we begin to raise the 375,000 as as our buy-in to the co-op and that ultimately um, if thing it it is what we've been talking about as the rationale for investment, but focused towards Steph, where if things don't work out, then the property is made whole, and whoever is part of the co-op and has invested in it is made whole. So Steph gets whatever portion is left to her, and whoever has invested or the 375,000 or whatever then is made whole to the people who put that in from the
Mhm.
sale of the property. I think
Yeah.
that's
So
what we've been.
it is the same concept, but instead of 10 years, there's a shorter window for how that works.
You mean is some phase two or phase three, the phase three timeline that we would agree to with her would could be a shorter timeline.
No, the phase two would be sort of instead of saying 10 years, if we can't, um, so basically phase two is proving that we can meet that goal. After we paid off the debt, then we have to raise a certain amount in a shorter window. And if we can't, the property goes back for sale. And then it becomes a race of if somebody can come by and make an offer on the property, whoever's invested up until that point is made whole based on the sale of the property. And if we can, then we can also continue to raise money, even if it goes back on the market, right? Then we still have the ability to continue to try to hit those targets which is why there is a kind of it doesn't, there's anyhow, if there's a proportion, like if we can get 90% of the way or 75% of the way towards that goal, then, can we get an extension for 6 months? Something like that. But in some ways, it doesn't change the circumstance where we still might sell the property, but it just takes the bank out of the equation and it makes it easier for us to have something for people to invest in.
Hmm.
I really like taking the bank out of the equation.
Hmm.
I really, really like that a lot. And so, yeah, I'd have to think a little bit more, you know, about the details on that, like what it would mean to the people investing if we're carrying it. We have to be strong. We just need to be constituted really badly. I
And
don't,
that's part of the question here, right? It's
yeah.
like because we are stuck in this chicken and an egg problem of, you know, can't do anything until we do something else.
Yeah.
And I have to take a quick bio break. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, the question to you, Becca, in terms of the Constitution is that I don't know how to word it. It's like, and maybe you see, I mean, you are going to be an investor, not maybe, one of the major investors, but maybe we will have a lot of people about the same amount that you want are willing to put in, and I don't even know what that is. But the question to you is, what do you need in place for a constitution in order for you to feel safe? You know?
Well, I think once we get the bylaws, once we're incorporated or whatever, I my concern still is the tax implications for the Lifeboat Academy of me being an actual investor rather than making a loan, which I don't know if you recall, but my accountant raised all kinds of hairy sounding things that would affect, and I think that I've been sort of waiting until we get the bylaws done to be able to either go back to my accountant or ask Bill who to go to say, is having investors from the US in this, having cooperative members, I guess, or shareholders or whatever we call it, from the US gonna create an undue burden on the lifeboat or the pharmacery. Um, but if that, I could, once we get incorporated and if that turns out not to be an issue, I could probably do 250,000 US, which is 330,000 today Canadian, which, gets us a good deal of the way towards retiring her debt.
It's
But
really,
those are that's a pretty big if. I mean, I could probably do it as a loan also, but I'd rather do it I'm actually a member and have the land as collateral. And, um,
I just don't know whether the bylaws and everything are whether that's what's going to make, whether that's what your lawyers, are they saying that that's what they need in order for them to advise you on how you can invest? The
yeah,
question is,
because
how can you invest? Because
well, I think it matters for me and my accounting, but it also matters for Lifeboat Academy because there was all kinds of really complicated stuff about, I don't remember what it was, but it was like all kinds of extra paperwork that Lifeboat Academy would have to do to prove that such and such was blah, blah, blah. But that was before we were talking about it as a cooperative. So I don't, but it was very, very complicated sounding. And it seemed like a burden that we might not want to take on as Lifeboat. And I may not be the only US investor, so I think we still have to figure that out after the bylaws are. I mean, once the bylaws are whatever you do to make them official, you
once
can
you
then
register, well, you register as a
register them.
cooperative,
Thank you.
and with it
There's
comes bylaws.
there's then you can get a bank account and then money can go into that bank account,
Yeah.
at least.
Mhm.
But we probably want the lawyer's help with like the shareholder agreement, or I don't even know if you call it shareholder, if it's a cooperative. Anyway, like that, like those documents so that people can take them to their accountants and say, here's what I own.
Mhm.
here, because anyway, so yeah, there's steps that are going to take a little while, but I'm not super worried about those steps. I just think we need to do
Okay.
them before I can write a check.
I'm just gonna, it'll come up again if there's something in the bylaws that you're confused about or don't, or anybody is, but particularly you don't feel very comfortable or understand it in a way that you could invest or that you could
Yeah, I
do.
don't think at this point it's in the bylaw. I mean, I think there's questions in the bylaws that we need to find, decide on and take care of and finalize, but I don't think any of them made me more concerned about my investment. Um,
I'm talking to you because you're the only one that we have here
yeah,
in the
yeah,
circle that is going to invest a sizable amount. So if we can answer the question for you and you're then we can answer it for other people. They're not going to be as um well, maybe they will be, I don't know. Yeah.
is what.
Well, as engaged,
Oh, yeah.
if they've got lots of money and they're investing in this, they'll give it to their accountant and they will say, I don't think it's a good idea and you shouldn't do it or not. But we're looking at somebody who's committed to the project in you.
Yeah.
And then if you're comfortable with it and understand it to the best that you can in terms of what commitment you've made and what the finances look like, then we've got a great template for anyone else.
Hmm. So I'm inclined to follow up with Bill and say, did you do the last things yet? And also, remember these other questions about US investors? Can you advise us about that? Like, can you advise us about the next steps, including that? Um, I'm just writing this down. The last things, the next steps, including US investors, implications. And he may not know, but he may know somebody, and he lives here, which is awesome. Um, so yeah, and yes, of course, yes to the yes. This is just the first of a series of conversations with Steph, and I think that I would feel comfortable with like we have this idea we want to run by you about how to get the bank out of the equation and get us out from under the chicken and egg situation and make clear
Mm.
to her what that chicken and egg thing, how that's
Mhm.
preventing. It's about to be the thing preventing. The bylaws have been a thing, but
Even that, I think
eh,
the chicken and the egg is what made the bylaws also more complicated,
right.
Yeah.
so
But also, but and just to say, and this is a first conversation about would you be willing to consider something like this so that she's not like no right
Right.
away,
Yeah.
to frame it that way.
totally.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is, I think, this is, I'm flagging this as being one of the challenges, not insurmountable, but to be aware of that um, we as Westerners have a tendency of expecting when we're presented with something that that's what it is, as
Yeah.
opposed to this is what we're proposing as the beginning of a conversation to come to an agreement on something that would work for all of us. So like that sort of co-creating kind of thing.
And and
And being
it,
able to keep that first and forward, I think would be really important. Like this, we're proposing this as the start of a conversation, and this is how we see it working, and yeah,
And to try to keep drilling down to underlying needs rather than positions.
right, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And I think Steph is, we're not talking, we're talking about a person that we know who has
Mhm.
been very open to, and she's said in so many words, I'm open to options. I don't know what they are, but I'm open to ideas. And I totally think that is the spirit in my mind was always kind of, we have this crazy idea, you know.
Right.
We think it might work, but I really like how you were framing it, Becca, as well, in terms of, you know, one of the challenges for us is the whole chicken and the egg thing. One of the challenges for you is, not having uh, having things linger. And, here is something that we think might be a way of addressing all those needs. And it's an idea, and we'll have to work out the details.
And I think actually also being able to give the whatever we call the business plan or the breakdown of income, uh, uh, having that on hand would also be useful because we can talk about it as this, not only that this is what we're thinking of as potential income, so that she can see that there's money coming in that could move towards the purchase of the property, but it's also talking about it in a way, this is what we see as being possible. And by being able to talk about this with a sense of security, this is how this is how other people will be able to see how they can fit in. And this is how we're going to get other people who would be able to come up or be able to come forward with the money to be able to finish to complete the purchase.
Hmm.
Hmm. And I think, we need to be prepared for unexpected things like her saying she wants to move back in to the land, or, like, I mean, if the world's falling apart, that could be what she's thinking, which, if it included you guys, would be a great thing, right? To
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
her there.
Well, and
So,
when she was living here before, she had other people living here as well. So I know that she's open to that.
Yeah. And if she was willing to do that, I think for her, because I know the world is falling apart, for her, I think it would be a really good thing to
right.
to to come back and uh then I am so looking forward to not living in this house anymore and to have our tiny house off to the side and to have this house available for people to come. You have no idea. The place is just too big and
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
Yeah,
it,
well, I love that you're because many people would go the opposite way. So that's
Mhm.
very comforting for me to hear you say that, Roland, because yeah, it is needs to be a revenue generating
Hmm.
facility, right? Um, I'm just I'm wanting to kind of I'm 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 experiencing some kind of reaction to a lot of the language we're using, and I just
hmm.
wanted to feed it back to you. It's very tentative. We're having a conversation. We're, like the potential of or the possibility, whatever it is. I'd like us to be firm about this is what this is what we're planning to do. I mean, there's
Or
nothing.
would like to do. Yeah.
This is what we like to. This is what we have in mind. Some other thing other than tentative. If we can get this agreement, this is what we're going to do.
This is where for this
And
to work, we need your help.
that's
Hmm.
right.
I think
Okay.
that's exactly where that comes
Right.
in because what we think we can do. The other thing too is there's a piece that I think I will publish today that, and Roland's had a look at it, and there's some minor edit, but it's really trying to describe the refuge. Ultimately, I think our tagline is a refuge for people in recovery from late stage capitalism. And that's what we are talking about creating is securing the land where this can be a place where people can come and re-experience a different relationship to themselves, each other, in the land, right? And that that's what we're trying to do, and I think we're all on the same page around that. And for that to happen, we have to figure out how this legal financial transfer happens. How do we break out of the chicken and the egg cycle?
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
that's where what we are really looking for and this is where I think tentative is okay language because it is dependent on Steph.
Well,
Hmm.
I know.
We can come with great ideas, and we need Steph to be able to show up and do her part of it. And that is what we're trying to do can there be this partnership between us and Steph, and how do we work out those details?
Right. And I don't want to assume that this is part of an ongoing conversation with her. She's looking a little bit desperate, I think. So it's let's figure out what's going to work. I mean, it needs to work for her for sure. Let's just,
Yeah.
I
So
think
so
yeah, go ahead.
I agree, and I have a question.
yeah,
I think I think what you're saying is that there is an also and where for us to be able to be definitive about what we're going to do, there is this question of how far is she willing to continue to go? How much further is she willing to go with us? So what we can do is contingent on what she's willing to do, what she is willing to do.
right. And we need to
But
ask her that kind of directly rather than,
yeah,
drag it out too long. She doesn't
Hmm.
want to drag it
but
out too long. And
agreed. But
and I
but I
guess the
just
language too is options. I like the language of options. There is a range of things that we could do here, you know. Um, and we need to know what what works for you maybe is the line. What would work for you? And can we start with that?
I
We know the flexibility that we have.
yeah.
But the other thing too, Roland, is that we're dealing with the season. This is a farm. We're dealing with the season. We've got to have, seeds in the ground. We've got to get animals on it. And they're not, it's not going to, it's, at least we need a season. We need to figure out what will work for her for us to be able to function seasonally on that farm.
But at the same
Roland had a
time,
question, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
I just overrode you.
Uh uh yeah, I should have written it down before
It'll come back.
I try to do that because I forget so easily. So um yeah, maybe it'll come back to me.
Put it
So
in the chat as soon as it comes back.
I will.
Anyway,
mhm. I
I
mean, I
I
think
think
that the other thing too
Oh, I
is
remember. I remember.
okay.
So, because I was also thinking, sorry to cut you off, Ben.
it's
I was
okay.
also
I do remember
thinking
my questions.
that these may be new ideas for Steph, and she may
Oh,
need more time than just one meeting to be able to work it through. And so that's I wasn't thinking when I was saying an ongoing conversation, I wasn't proposing ad infinitum. I was thinking that instead of creating this pressure where and because the sense that I have, because I tend towards the negative, is that she's like, I can't take this anymore, making her feel pressured that she's got to make a decision now, then I think the
oh
decision would
no.
be no. So if we're keeping it open where, we don't need to make a decision right away, we can meet a few more times, talk it through. That's more what I was thinking about, as opposed to a sort of endless discussion, which I don't think she would be into anyway.
But
No.
and the other thing I want to point out here is that we are trying to make decisions in a void of information, and we're making all sorts of assumptions about how stressed or not stressed, or we don't know. And I think that what I was saying by referring to this as an ongoing conversation is exactly that, is that we have to check in with Steph and see what are the vague outlines, and then are there questions? Does she need time? Do we need to figure out some other details? Like there's going to be stuff that's going to come up, and then we'll deal with it. And we can move as quickly as we can, but we're also are all um, so we're making a lot of assumptions, and we're also we are dealing in a negotiation situation where neither side of us is going to get we don't, the option that I would like, which is committed investors who are all on board and signed up and ready to move before we pull the trigger is not on the table. And Steph's probably preferred option of either that happening or somebody coming by and saying, I love it, I'm going to take care of it, and I will love it as much as you do, and here's a nice, generous check. That is not an option on the table for her. So, we're acting as though those options are what we're playing against, and we're actually playing against there hasn't been a showing and we can't and we're stuck in a chicken and the egg and we're trying to figure out how to make it work. So, like I think conversation is the right framework for this. And if conversation, Circle takes the time it needs, and we'll figure it out. And I have total confidence in Steph will let us know if she needs more time or that's one of the questions on that we have for the meeting is what's your timeline? What are your needs? And I think we have an idea that I think is very viable that we have thought about from our perspective and from her perspective, and it seems fair. And it's a good idea. And that doesn't mean that it's a done idea, So
And using affirmative language for sure. Or
hell yes.
Adopting more. This is what we're going to do.
It's
Not,
what
we
we'd
look
like
at
to do.
it's
Yeah.
not from a
Can we
base
look
of
at
fear.
the calendar? Since it's almost time for
Yes.
the end of our meeting, can we look at the calendar about when are we available to offer to Steph next week, right? Is that what we're
Mhm.
planning to do? And then also bylaws
Hmm.
machinations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
My
I
week
sent a
looks
message to Steph to find out if she had any other days during the week that she might be available if we wanted to meet um, uh,
Earlier than Friday.
earlier than Friday, with the possibility with Friday as being sort of the anchor as the time when,
so Friday the 17th, next
yeah,
Friday. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to say earlier in the week, um, I mean, do you want to know when I'm available
I
or
think what I'd
no?
like to do is just to see if Steph is available earlier in the week, and then once I've got her times, then
Okay.
And
we
and
can.
I am not. I've got a big
Oh,
deadline on the 14th,
great.
and I am not. I cannot take on anything
Okay.
before then.
Okay.
So I am not available until the afternoon of the 14th or beyond.
So then what I'm going to propose is that I've checked in with you guys, and Friday is the best time for
And
everybody.
there's still Wednesday or Thursday or, for others, but I just wanted to take Monday
No,
and
you've
Tuesday
got to
morning
be
off.
there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I have various things Wednesday and Thursday, but I do have some windows of availability. So
Okay.
if you want to know them, I can send them to you. What about you, Heather?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my schedule. I have Thursday's completely out for me. Um, and then Wednesday would be okay.
Wednesday's okay for me too.
And Wednesday's not okay for me.
Mm.
Friday it is.
Friday it
Friday it
is.
Yeah,
is.
there we go.
Okay.
Determination.
I'm available Tuesday as well, actually.
I'm not.
But
Okay. Yeah. I'm good. Friday.
So, and in terms of bylaws, I can commit to reading the comments this week. And then I don't even know, I haven't even looked at the comments, so I have no idea what we're talking about in terms of a level of work to address the comments. So can we defer until,
Sure.
yeah,
Is
and
this
also, Ben,
something
I'm
that
happy to get to meet with just you and me like we did that one time if we think a lot of them we could handle and or we could at least go through it once and figure out what are the three
and then
things we need
come,
to talk to everybody
yeah,
about or
I like that.
I like that
actually
too. I like
actually doing
that.
Heather's like, bylaws up to here. Um, well, and what we can do is just comment on do put comments on the document
Comments
and
on the comments.
comment on the comments, and then if then there are many outstanding questions, then we can decide what to do about that.
Right.
Do we,
And we do,
I was just
and
gonna say,
we're actually after time too. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
any last absolutely burning things to get through? All right, bye everybody.
Hi.
Thank you to everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
You.
We'll be in touch soon.